I'd like to call this meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Shanawith?
She stepped out for a moment.
Okay. Mr. Hayes?
Present.
Ms. Huth?
Here.
Mr. Otto?
Here.
Ms. Pat?
Present.
Mr. Whalen?
Here.
Ms. Wyman?
Here.
Mayor Satterthwaite?
Here. We have a quorum. The first item on our agenda this evening is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any additions or corrections?
No.
Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have additions to the agenda. I'm going to suggest again that we move the board map item to the end of the meeting so that we can entertain business that other people are here for before we get into that discussion. Is there any objection to moving that? We'll go ahead and do that.
Mayor Satterthwaite?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's no objection, if we could also, the B1 discussion might take a while, and since there are people here on all the other items, if we also would move that. I don't know if others object, but I just think that's going to be a little bit of a discussion.
You want to put that at the beginning of new business or end of new business, or? I don't really care. I know there are some people here in the
Are there
audience.
people here about B1?
Yeah.
Oh, all right, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware.
A couple. Well, I know Bob Leach has put that one.
Never mind.
Well, we can do that at the beginning of new business if you want to do that. Okay. Is there any objection to moving the item under old business number 1 to new business and have it before any of the other items? Any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go on to petitions and communications. If there's anybody here that would like to petition the council for a period of no more than 5 minutes, if you'll bring one of these cards up to myself or the clerk, I'll get a chance to do so. And you can have your 5 minutes either right now or at the time of the agenda item. And so we don't have that ability to check your card yet, so when I call your name, just let me know if you want to speak now or at the time of the agenda item. Bob Leach, 910 North Broadway. Bob?
I'll speak now.
Okay, come on up.
This concerns the ordinance number 2004-03-029. It's the convenience store at the corner of Lincoln and Bradley. And I've got a concern regarding the annexation agreement and zoning change. The concern is it has to do, and I'm sure everyone was concerned about this, how close that is to the water wells of Illinois American Water Company. I got a lot of information from minutes of a planning commission meeting and the city staff's recommendation on it. And it sounds like most of the things have been addressed, problems have been addressed. But one thing I noticed was that the letter from the water company to Bruce Walden and the city, where it says that they have no objections to the proposed location, that's stated again in the Planning Commission report, and I think city staff says something about that too. And it's true they don't have any objections, but they do have a couple of requests. And I hope the city council will read those and consider those. One is about following the Illinois Administrative Code. And And I don't know if the design or the architectural and engineering firm that is doing the project, they mentioned putting in some monitoring wells and some electronic monitoring, and I don't know if that is part of this Illinois Administrative Code or not. And also, the water company makes a request about loss of product or routine operation of the facilities. And I interpret that to mean they're worried about, spillage when people are pumping gas and then that going slowly with runoff, rains going into the detention pond there. And the water company's concern is that that somehow that be cleaned out before it sits in the retention pond too long. That's how I interpret that. Anyway, I wonder, are these things that should be part of the annexation agreement, or are these just things that that's sort of a given and the agreement is for other things? I don't. In other words, I wonder if that should be included in the agreement. Things like monitoring wells and who's going to monitor. I think there was talk of that somewhere, maybe in the newspaper article, it said that the state and federal government will be monitoring these. Is that true? I don't know. I wonder if the council needs to hear from the water company and the EPA on this or not. That's what I wanted to.
Okay, well, when that item comes up, we'll have a chance to ask staff if they've looked into that and see if we can get some answers for you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Next is Jerry Moreland at 703 North Matthews.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jerry Moreland. I reside at 703 North Matthews. Tonight I speak as a resident of Urbana. First of all, I thank you, the Urbana City Council, for this opportunity to address you about a important community issue. I speak of the possible change of Provena Medical Center's nonprofit status. I know that right now Provena's plan is to appeal the $1.1 million order served them, and from what I understand, that amount has been paid to the city of Urbana. I also know that the notion of an appeal can further delay any true litigation, but I as a citizen want to be proactive and part of a community that will keep me informed. I solicit your feedback concerning this situation as you see it today and your plan of action as the situation unfolds. I'm sure that all the members of the council are familiar with this TIF-3 manual established in 1990, and I hope that this manual is given the greatest priority in the event of a change to the nonprofit status that Provena now holds. Again, I thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Moreland?
Yes.
Mr. Chenoweth?
I just want to understand, are you requesting that we give careful consideration to it, or are you supporting that we challenge the nonprofit status of Provena? I'm not sure if I'm clear.
No, I'm not asking you to oppose the status change. I'm saying in the event of a status change, that priority be given to the plans, the redevelopment plans and projects for the TIF-3 district. And what I'm asking of you tonight, I'm soliciting your feedback on that situation as you see it today and what your plan of action is in the occurrence of a status change.
Are there particular projects? I know there's a number of projects listed in TIF-3, and it's kind of a basket of eligible projects. Are there particular projects that you're interested in seeing move forward?
Well, of course. Just to name a few,
In terms of priority, just some of your top priority items, because we are looking at the TIF 3 district more carefully, so I'd be interested in your input on that.
for one, I know since I was a young guy, a young toddler, even a baby, Goodwin Avenue has been a bit of a whirl or a bit of a roller coaster as you proceed north from University, as well as some of the curbs. I don't see many curbs north of University in the King District area. I know in my particular neighborhood in particular. I don't know, sidewalks. There was talk of a community center. Maybe that could be given some priority for our senior citizens that needed something to do to occupy their time during the day. There's been plans of a bicycle trail down Goodwin Avenue. I just want, and I appreciate on the corner of Goodwin and Fairview, what's been done to the little park. As I understand it is Urbana's property, and it looks beautiful. The flowers that were planted. You know, the fence that was taken out that was dilapidated and falling down. It looks great. But even further attention would I'm sure, be appreciated. And it is needed. And I, again, thank you for your time. Well, what I mean, you're...
Let me just get, you're right that the TIF and the payment from Provena are directly related, since all of the 1.1 million went into the TIF 3 fund. Now, is that entire amount going to stay there even if Provena fails in its appeal? The answer to that is probably not. I mean, we never anticipated in the TIF that Provena would be taxable and it would get a windfall of that amount of money. And so I think we would have some responsibility to other local taxing jurisdictions, specifically the school district and the park district, to distribute a good portion of that money to them. And so, of course, they're, with the park district and the school district, probably 60 to 70% of the property tax bill that you get. So the majority of it would have to be, we'd have to decide exactly what the split would be and how it would be distributed. But I think it would be unrealistic to expect that entire amount would stay in the TIF.
I understand that.
So, but your point nonetheless is well taken, that there are projects in the TIF 3, and there are some funds in there even aside from the Provena windfall, and we should be prioritizing those. So we'd certainly welcome your input on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I also believe, just if I could follow up, Mayor,
Ms. Chenoweth?
the bike path is going in this year, so it's already scheduled, irregardless of the future of Provena Covenant and its nonprofit status.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have David Williams on Lincoln Avenue on the service station. David? Okay. Betty Williams, Betty? North Lincoln Avenue to speak about the service station.
Hi. I'm Betty Williams, and I live at 1204.
Betty, could you speak right into that microphone there, and so people have the benefit
Can
of
you hear
hearing
me now?
Yeah, speak right into that thing. There you go.
Hi, Mr. Wheeler.
Hello, Betty.
As I say, I'm Betty Williams, and I live at 1204 North Lincoln Avenue. And I guess you know why I'm here. Because I'm a little bit concerned about the service station being put down there across from Melrose. Tell you the truth, I don't know why we need another service station. We got 4 already on our street. The Super Pantry and the Max, the Mobile, and Speedway. All of them sell beer. 2 of them sell wine, And one thing I'm concerned about is selling hard liquor down there. That is, if it goes up anyway, even though I'm against it. But I want to ask you all to make sure you know what you're doing down there, because you never know what might happen in the future. And another thing that I'm concerned about is a huge sign on that street. When I come out of my driveway, I don't want to see no big signs. You see what I mean? And I'm concerned about that. And another thing, the zoning, I'm concerned about that. I would like for you all to discuss a little bit more about that. And another thing, I would like to hear from the water company. And I want to hear from the EPA before you all decide to vote on it. I've been over there on North Lincoln Avenue since 1965. And I love where I live at. And I've always fought every time something come up that we was against. You know that, don't you? All the time. So I'm asking you all to be very careful and take your time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Williams? All right, thank you. Any other petitions or communications from members of the public? From council members? Yes, Mr. Hayes.
I just want to take this time to thank Community Development, Public Works, and the Arbor Division for the work they've done at that city-owned park down there on the corner of Goodwin and Beslin. For a long time, the place was going down, dilapidated, and no one knew who it belonged to. So upon research between the park district and the city, it was owned by the city. So since they took it under their wings to try to beautify the neighborhood, they've done a wonderful job. They got a walk planned in, flowers all over, and what they've done so far, they've done a marvelous job. I just want to say thank you.
Mr. Hayes. Yes, Ms. Chenoweth?
Just wanted to mention to council members, for those of you who weren't able to go to downtown Urbana or Champaign this last weekend, the Boneyard Arts Festival was this last weekend, and there was record weather and potentially record turnout at various times of the day. The evenings seemed to be a little more busy than the days, but our office was packed in downtown Urbana Friday night for our show, and after that show we sent everyone down to the Iron Post where it was packed with the Noisy Gators, and so there was really, my vision and my ideal Champaign-Urbana is that I walk out my door and there's art everywhere, and that's how I felt this weekend, and I just want to thank council members. I know that we support the CVB, and through that the Boneyard Arts Festival, and I also know that staff, Public Works went and put Boneyard Arts Festival signs up throughout the downtown, and we've done a lot to promote that festival, and it was a success.
Any other petitions or communications from council members this evening? Okay, we'll move on. We'll go to reports of standing committees, since the old business is later in the agenda now. Strato, are you the chair?
I think so. Resolution number 2004-04-008R, a resolution authorizing the extension of an agreement for use of right-of-way at Illinois American Water Company. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 2004-04-009R, a resolution providing for the financing by the City of Urbana, Illinois, of the acquisition and construction of certain nursing home facilities to provide increased job opportunities and retain existing jobs, authorizing the issuance of multiple series capital improvement revenue bonds, Clark Lindsay Village, Inc. project in connection therewith, authorizing the execution and delivery of a loan agreement, supplemental loan agreements, a mortgage and security agreement, and an assignment agreement and supplemental assignments securing such bonds, authorizing and providing for the sale of such bonds, authorizing the execution and delivery of arbitrage regulation agreements and related matters. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have some folks here representing Clark Lindsay. If there are any questions, gentlemen here in the front row, so if there are any questions during the course of the discussion, well, just feel free and we'll see if we can get some answers. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any questions? Being none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 7 ayes. Mr. Otto?
Resolution number 2004-04-007 R. A resolution evidencing the intention of the City of Urbana, Champaign County, Illinois, to reserve the 2004 private activity bond for the purpose of furthering neighborhood initiatives. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth? Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 7 ayes. Ms. Pat, I guess I was mistaken. I thought Mr. Leach was here to speak about B1, but it was about another item. So we can move that to the end right before the redistricting if there's no objection to that. Councilman? Okay, we'll just do new business and then we'll go to old business at the end of the meeting. First under new business is an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an annexation agreement, 1501 North Lincoln Avenue, annexation agreement, approximately 2.71 acres on the southwest corner of Lincoln Avenue and Bradley Avenue, plan case number 1887-A-04 and 1887-M-04. Mr. Kowalski?
Thank you. These two cases are together, and it's forwarded from the Plan Commission where a public hearing was held on the proposed annexation agreement and on the rezoning. I should note from the beginning that although the Plan Commission had a public hearing for the zoning and the annexation agreement, there is officially required a public hearing with the City Council for the annexation agreement. In order to give legal notice, we have that hearing scheduled for 7/20 on May 3rd, and then final action by City Council after that official hearing. But we did think it was a good idea, considering the press coverage on the case and some of the concerns that have been coming in, to discuss the item tonight so you can learn about it and have some questions answered, and representatives of the developer are here as well for the discussion. But just to give you some background, again, this is about a 2.71 acre parcel located at the southwest corner of Lincoln Avenue and Bradley Avenue. It is not in the city currently, although it is surrounded by the city limits, and it has not been developed. The proposal is to annex, divide the parcel into two. There'd be about a 2 acre parcel on the north side and then a smaller 0.7 acre parcel on the south side. And the immediate proposal is to construct a convenience store, gas station, and what's called a quick service restaurant, which is kind of like a fast food restaurant inside the convenience store, except no drive-through, on that larger parcel on the corner of Lincoln and Bradley. In order to do that, we have to agree to annex, and your packet contains a draft annexation agreement. As with any agreement, there are obligations by the city and obligations by the developer that are spelled out. The primary obligations by the developer are essentially all site improvements, including any improvements that are needed to access control, curb cuts, etc. Also, improvements of extending a sanitary sewer to the site. Those are all be provided and paid for by the developer. There's no city incentives or subsidies that are being put into this project. The agreement also specifies obligations of the city. One of those agreements and obligations is that we would rezone the parcel from its current Champaign County B2 Neighborhood Business Zoning District to City B3 General Business Zoning District. According to our zoning ordinance, on annexation, the zoning directly converts. In this case, it would directly convert to B1 Neighborhood Business Zoning District. We thought, considering the development, considering the location, the better long-term zoning for that parcel would be B3 instead of B1. Convenience store, gas station, and a lot of the sign allowances, etc., would fall short under our B1 requirements, although we could write all those into the annexation agreement, but we thought it'd be better to rezone to B3. The developer agreed, and the Plan Commission had a public hearing on that on April 8th and concurred. Another obligation of the city that's specified in your agreement is that there be a variance granted on the sign allowances for the site. Our zoning ordinance would allow a 50 square foot sign each on Bradley and then one on Lincoln. The agreement specifies a variance up to 83 square feet, and I think your packet includes a rendering of what the sign would look like. The reason a larger sign is requested is there's essentially 3 products or services that are being advertised at that location, one being the convenience store, which I believe will be a Circle K, the other one being the brand of gasoline that will be sold, the other one being the restaurant that will be inside the convenience store, and then the fourth one, which is required, is the pricing information. So a slightly larger sign is requested for there. The other issue in the annexation agreement is the liquor license that is proposed. There has been a change. The original drafts of the annexation agreement specified a Class C liquor license, which is packaged for beer, wine, and hard alcohol. That has been changed, or will be changed when you act on this in 2 weeks, to a Class BBB license, which would allow only packaged beer and wine to be purchased and carried off-site, nothing consumed on the site. So that is one change in the agreement that you'll see. Again, the Plan Commission did have a public hearing in this. You'll have one on May 3rd as well, and final consideration on May 3rd. But final issue with the Illinois American Water Company. Your staff report does have a copy of the letter that they submitted. Of course, when we heard of the proposal, knowing where it was located, that was the first contact we made, was to the water company, and reviewed the proposal with them. They have 3 requests on their letter. They say they have no problems with the plan, and we shared the site plan with them. Their first request is that the associated pumps and underground storage tanks be located outside the 400-foot setback zone determined by the Illinois EPA. The underground storage tanks will be located just about 600 feet from any active wellhead on the property next door. I should note that there are a couple different functions of the water company property next to the west. One is it's their north well field. The primary function of that is to hold and detain water before it is treated at the University and Lincoln site. And that's, if you look at an aerial map, you'll see what looks like a big pond. That's the primary purpose of that reservoir. The second and smaller function of that is actually an active wellhead that does pump water from the ground, holds it in that basin, and then is subsequently treated. The location of that wellhead that pumps for water is located about 600 feet from the underground storage tank. So that exceeds the Illinois state law, and the water companies indicated that they're okay with that. The second request that they made is that the design of the facility meets the requirements for the Illinois state statute for the underground storage tanks. That's a requirement, a state requirement of the developer, regardless, and I can let them speak a little more to what exactly that is, but I know the requirement is that the pipes in the underground storage tanks be double lined with an automatic shut-off system. So if there is a rupture of the first lining before any product is discharged into the ground, the system shuts down and it has to be repaired before it can be turned back on. And then the third request that the water company had was that there be assurances that any product that is collected on the ground and washed into the detention basin be treated or removed prior to entering into a storm sewer or groundwater system. And that is something that also the developer has proposed in their construction documents. And that is something that some language we could put into the annexation agreement to be sure that those construction document how they will basically filter product that is washed into their detention basin. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the annexation agreement or the process. And again, Jeff Marshall from Design and Planning is the project engineer. He is here, as well as representatives from Bushman LLC.
Questions? Yes, Ms. Chenoweth?
My first question is why we're not looking at zoning this as B2, given that it's a less intensive zoning category and it allows by right for a convenience store, and I believe a gas station is conditional, although that's also the case perhaps for B3. So I guess I'm wondering, since we're zoning this piece of property kind of forever in some ways, bringing it into the city, did we look at zoning B2, which is more for arterials, rather than B3, which can allow for more intensive use?
The B2 zoning district it's called business arterial.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of a special district that was set up primarily for the Springfield Avenue corridor. It is designed to allow for businesses and also first or second floor residential. It was a little more of an urban type of business zoning district that was set up for along primarily Springfield Avenue. If you look at your zoning map, that's where you see it. But the most prevalent zoning district, and the one that most of our other gas stations and convenience stores are located in, I say most, not all, but is the B3 general business zoning district.
And my second question is the language that the Illinois Water Company, the language that they requested, is that in our packet? Because I don't remember reading that specific language, or is that new to the information we have before us?
Yeah, it's in your packet on their letterhead. It's a letter to Bruce Walden.
Okay, but it's not in our annexation agreement or
No.
the rezoning agreement.
No, it's not. The first two items are really state law. The third item is what I mentioned, the provisions for the detention, but none of them are specifically referenced in the agreement.
Is there a difference between just reading from the Plan Commission meeting notes? I believe that's page 9 of the Plan Commission meeting notes. There was a question, Mr. White asked if the gas tanks would be double-lined with sensors, and Mr. Marshall said that although it's not required, quote, the petitioner will, plan to put double-walled tank in with double-walled piping and a chase. So I guess I'm trying to understand whether or not we should include, given that this seems to be the intention of the petitioner, and we've spent quite a bit of time, although this is for older gas stations, the city picking up the cost of environmental remediation when we want to redevelop an area that's become a brownfield because of gas stations. I think if someone representing the petitioner, I believe Mr. Marshall was representing the petitioner, is that correct?
Right.
If someone representing the petitioner said that this was the intention, I wonder why we wouldn't go ahead and put that in the either, I don't know if it's appropriate in the annexation or zoning agreement, but in one of the binding agreements. And then my other question would be, in his case, he's saying it's not required, but according to what you just said about Illinois American Water Company's request, it is required by state law. So it might be that I'm just hitting up against my lack of understanding around these issues, but if you could clarify, that would be helpful.
I would ask Mr. Marshall if he would, and if you want to do that now, or if you want to wait till the end to explain a little more about the state requirements for the lining of the tanks.
Is there any objection to hearing from Mr. Marshall now? Marshall?
All right, Jeff.
Got visuals. Try to help you with this understanding. I mean, it is kind of complicated. And for many, many, many years, gas stations were unregulated in the manner that they put together these projects. What this site, when I talk about the requirements of state law and federal law with underground tanks, there is no requirement that the underground tanks be a double-walled tank. There is a requirement that they either be fiberglass or they be cathodically protected if they're a steel tank. The petitioner, though, because of its location and because of the fact that they also have to deal with the site becomes much less usable. We also have investors and people that are paying for this, and we have to look for the protection of those people also. The site underground tank, therefore, on this site is going to be what they call an interstitial tank. It has double wall, means we have two walls of fiberglass with polyethylene coverings. In between that interstitial space is a monitoring space. And we check by automation for any kind of gas vapors or water penetration, either going out of the tanks or coming into the tanks. So we have, with respect to the tank, that kind of protection. Laws changed in 1999, and the types of problems that you have with the brown fields and things like that occurred because we were putting steel tanks in the ground without protections. Steel piping into the ground without protection. They would rust, they would leak. There was no way to monitor that. The systems that we have here, we have a tremendous amount of technology that's used in the monitoring, but we also have some multitude of fail-safe operations that go on when we do this. Generally, a double wall piping system would include an inner wall and an external wall. And in between that, again, you would have an interstitial space. That is what's monitored for failure, either outside in or inside out. You have mechanical leak detection, you have electronic leak detection, so on and so forth. The laws are not real stringent with respect to the technology that needs to be used on these sites. However, this site will be towards the upper end of technology. In fact, there's really nothing more that we can do with an underground system because there's nothing available in the technology to do any more protection than what we are going to provide you. Secondly, we talk about a chase, sort of like a conduit. The piping that goes on inside under the ground, this can be put in the ground just like it is without having anything else done to it. It's approved by EPA, both state and federal. This system will have actually a chase line that the product goes through. So not only if you have a failure or a breach in the system, you also have a chase that you can then take containment and go to what we call sumps. Under every device, every kind of penetration or termination of one of these lines, there'll be a sump location. That sump is also contained. So if there was a failure or whatever, they can purge this chase line over and above just the double wall line and work towards any kind of solution to the problem. Once this is breached, in order to put it back online, you have to have a technician that is trained in this system. The person at the counter just can't turn the switch back on and say we're going to provide gas again. It will stop the system until everything is taken care of. We also have a lot of other aspects of control under our current laws. We have to have tank tightness tests performed on the sites. We have to have inspections performed. These things are regulated both by the IEPA and by the State Fire Marshal's Office. When the tanks go in the ground, inspectors from the Fire Marshal's Office have to be present when they go in the ground for compliance. We talked about, I think one of the individuals talked about monitoring wells. The monitoring wells we have on site are our monitoring wells. They're not required under the rules to be installed, but we are putting them in. It provides us the protection so that we know that we don't have failures. You know, there's a lot of liability with the operation of a site like this. So these types of things are part of our standard operations. They were installed when we did the site at Cunningham Road and so on and so forth. So those are basically that's the information about this, and I've got more if you want.
I have two follow-up questions. Thank you, that's very helpful, as are visuals. That's how I think visually. Would there be any objection by the petitioner if we wrote the language, the petitioner will put a double-walled tank with double-walled piping and a chase, which was from the notes of the meeting, as well as monitoring wells into our agreements?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
That's absolutely no problem.
Wonderful. And then the second question is, and it's not so much an issue of technical failure on your part or the part of the business as much as it's technical failure on the part of the user or the customer coming in, which is that there's almost always gasoline and oil runoff, either from leaky cars or spillage of gasoline. And I wonder what kinds of plans you have to treat runoff, rainwater runoff that would then be washing a higher concentration of gasoline off of your property as compared to, say, other properties that have different kinds of uses.
The two things about hydrocarbons, and one of them is that they are volatile under sunlight. What happens is if you spill gas and things like that, you do have a certain amount of VOC that goes into the environment, but you also have the activity that is performed by sunlight that actually breaks down those chemicals and things like that. The problem that we have with underground leaks and problems is we can't control that because we haven't the availability of sunlight to help ameliorate the problem. We also have, the people that operate the locations have to have in their operations manual an owner's emergency response requirement. There are things that happen. People have a little bit of a leak that when they pull a tank out, they spill some on the ground or whatever. Generally, those things go by vapor. They don't extend. They don't stay on the ground. Gasoline is lighter than water. When you see anything like an oil slick or something like that on the water, you have a problem. But in general, you won't get those kinds of runoffs off of the site because they don't exist. Under the Phase 2 of the Clean Water Act, we talk about BMPs. Best management practices for sites like this. It is the intention of the owner with the development of this site to utilize grass as part of our BMP. It helps us take these products that may be getting off-site, if they were ever to get off-site, and it gives us an opportunity to have them filtered, and then as far as a wash, as the water goes off-site, the dirts, all those kinds of things. If there are spills on the site, we are under strict obligation both at the state level to respond to those, and they have different levels of notifications that occur if there is a spill on the site. So we have, not only are we operating under the best management practice of the Clean Water Act, but we also are operating under the requirements of the state law. So if we have a spill, those kinds of notifications are required. In the days 5 years ago, 10 years ago, those kind of requirements were not as enforceable, and they didn't exist on the books. So we have some very, very specific things we have to do, and cleanup technologies that have to occur right on site before it even gets to the runoff. We should have no more runoff off of the site than you will off the city streets, and in fact, usually we'll have less.
And so if I could just ask a final question, then I'll cede the floor. Have you seen the letter from the Illinois American Water
Yes, ma'am.
Company? And so number 3 of that is a request that Max Convenience Store ensure protection through the design and operation of the site, that upon loss of product or routine operation of facilities, the product can be collected prior to or within the stormwater detention basin. What is your response to that request by Illinois American Water?
That we'll follow the provisions of the Phase 2 of the Clean Water Act, and that the operations will go as required under both state statute and federal law. We can't allow that to happen. We can't allow distribution of that on the site, and it's done by best management practices. There aren't large pieces of equipment that would be available to clean water in that manner, so it's done by management. The reason that you get hundredths of a gallon on your dispenser when you put it in your tank is because we have to account for every gallon of gas that is either brought to the site or distributed off the site. So spills are very, very much monitored. These sites are not our monitored sites. We have an employee on site whenever the site is in operation. The technology that we're using here will allow the site to be operated without someone on site, but we just don't operate sites like that. There's emergency response, emergency kill switches, all kinds of stuff that are part of that protection. We have solenoid valves for people that drive off with the nozzle on their car that automatically shut the system off. We have people that run into MPDs, which are the pumps are actually in the ground. They're not the thing that you use up on the site. But if that's hit, we have automation that actually shuts all those systems off so that there cannot be any product distributed, and we don't, we can contain any kind of problems that we have on the site. So all of those safeguards are part of both the law and part of this installation.
Any other questions?
What are the hours proposed for the gas station and quick restaurants?
Generally, the operation of these sites are 24 hours. There will be, with the QSR, they probably won't operate 24 hours. It'll be something shorter than that.
Oh, the quick shop restaurant.
Yeah,
Okay.
and at this site, there's an agreement with a company called Quiznos Subs that will be a part of that.
Okay. And the signage you're planning on having, are you planning on having signage on both frontages, Bradley and Lincoln?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the lighting issue is an issue that often comes up, especially when it's near residential areas. I believe this is across the street or down the street from, well, it's not obviously next door to University Commons, but across, on the other side of the street, you heard some petitioners talk. What's the lighting going to be like?
Okay, lighting on this site is a metal halide system. Metal halide is a much brighter, whiter light than the kind of sites that the way that gasoline stations many times have been operated is that you have two types of metal halide. You'll have what they call a horizontal burn. You also have a vertical burn. Horizontal burn lights are the old style. They have a box, and then they have a lens that drops under the box, and then you light the bottoms. And they used to put 30 or 40 under a canopy, just a very small canopy, to try to get as much light as they possibly could on the ground. The reason that they put so many of them is they try to get the light to bend up underneath the light so that the bottom of the canopy is lit. If you do that, then it looks like it's very bright and very safe at night. About 7 years ago, the vertical burn industry came into existence, and they started dropping these light bulbs down inside of a lens that was exposed below the bottom of the canopy. So sites that were like the Bigfoot site on Cunningham Road has what they call a vertical burn lamp, the vertical burn lamp with a lens that drops below the canopy. So basically when you're driving down the street, you get a nice shot of the burn section of a metal halide lamp. We worked with the city of Normal about 5 years ago in the adoption of an ordinance that they have there. This site will have what they call, it'll be a vertical burn lamp. The reason that we go with vertical burn lamps is that we can change the light bulbs from the ground. We can open the lens and get a stick up there, and you don't have to have a truck come out. But we also on this site will be taking those lamps and cutting them flush to the bottom of the canopy, not extended below the bottom of the canopy. So we don't have that kind of glare or that bare bulb problem that you would see with a lot of the under canopy lights. But this site is under the new technology, but it will be, the lamps themselves will not have the burn section below the canopy.
And is any of that light going to be going up, or is it all going to be basically sheltered so that it'll be facing only downward?
Well, when the lamp is up above the canopy, you have a shroud. You have to have a reflector, and it'll all be going down. We're not really doing anything. If the lenses on those things are stick down about like this, the ones that you see at places like Cunningham are about that deep. There's not enough room for that lamp to expose the burn section of the lamp, so most of the light is going to go down. There are some refractors in it that give a little bit of a shove, just like these prismatic lenses do here, but there's not really a forcible push of the light out into your face. So those go directly down. The lighting for the site lighting is all directed interior to site. The only place that we usually and will allow light to run off the site is going to be at the entrances. We don't want to have people, we don't own the property to the street, we own it to our property line. We want to make sure that we light the entrance so that you can see the curb lines. So the only light that will really be coming off the site, except for some ambient light, 2 or 3 foot candles, is going to be the light that is brought right onto the entrances so that we can light the curb line so people know where they're driving. So
there won't be a lot of extra light that goes or interferes with the residential area?
No, ma'am, there won't.
Okay. And so you're saying that the lighting will be similar to the Bigfoot on Cunningham if we wanted to go?
What I said is that the lights at Cunningham are a vertical burn fixture, but they extend below the canopy.
Okay.
These will not. These will be tucked up under the canopy, so we don't get that bright light when you're driving by.
Okay. And just one final question. Is there any other gas station that is going to have that currently exists in Champaign-Urbana that will have a similar lighting effect as the one that this would?
All of the sites that are in Urbana that I know of either have this vertical burn system with the light drop below, or have the old box-style horizontal burn lights with the 2 or 3 inch lens on them. So none of these have that. The only site that I have done recently in Illinois that has that type of lighting would be one in Normal on North 50 in Normal. So.
Okay. Is that near the Holiday Inn there?
No, the Holiday Inn's, I think it's the next exit in.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I got one.
Yeah, Mr. Hayes.
Bob Kowalski. As you was giving us an overview on what the annexation agreement was all about. You mentioned something about should be a filter to remove the product. Yeah, what was that? Should be written in, you said.
Well, that was one of the questions we could ask for the developer. One of the, I believe, one of the provisions that could be provided is some kind of filter in the detention basin or in the construction. Maybe it's just the best management practices, but can you elaborate on that, Jeff? Is there how the detention basin would be designed or constructed?
Detention basins are going to be just generally like a regular detention basin would be constructed. Only the difference on this site will be that we will use best management practice in the construction and the location of those and try to get grass and things like that to do the filtration requirements for the site. That's the way when the federal government put together the provisions for phase 2 of the EPA Act. Those are the most reliable systems. What we're talking about is a product which is gasoline and you know, oil spills and things like that may come off of a vehicle, and to try to control where that goes. Generally, when you're driving down the road or whatever, it just goes right into the runoff of the system. But in general, also, gasoline and the hydrocarbon products generally will by their own action evaporate into the environment, and they will be, when we talk about cleaning up a site, we actually farm the ground. Contaminated soils can be put on the ground and they can be tilled, and the sunlight will actually get rid of the contaminants in the soils and they can be reused. So the proposal here, or what our plan is to build a system that follows the best management practices of the phase 2 of the Clean Water Act, which was put into effect about a year ago. And that methodology is to use both the operation and the maintenance requirements of the site. If you have a spill on the site, a notable spill, a visual spill, those kinds of things are dealt with by the managers of the site, and they operate under the provisions of they'll never get to the off the site, because we have an obligation both under our licensing and under our operations to deal with that. And if we don't deal with it, then they can go to jail. So we're very much regulated as to how we operate these sites and how they have to be maintained. In general, most sites that you see don't have a lot of grass around them. This site has a huge amount of grass. And it has a huge amount of control with respect to that before it goes into the site. If there were ever a major spill of some work for some reason, maybe I'm not even sure what it was, even if a tanker lost its line, the automatic shutoffs in the tanker would stop it. You may lose gallonages, but at that point in time, we have to bring in specialists, environmentalists, to take care of and clean up that system.
So I think what we could do is similar to the double-walled, double-lined tanks. We could include some language in the annexation agreement that refers to the best management practices for the phase 2. It's something that's required by state law anyway, but it's just an additional heads up as our public works staff reviews construction plans for the site to remind them that these are required, and to make sure that those requirements are being taken into consideration.
On these pumps, do they have fail-safe pumps? Sometimes people are pumping gas and they put on automatic, and so the car fills up, but the pump doesn't cut off. You got gas going all over the place.
The way that these operations work, and these are the newer style operations, these kinds of MPDs, they're called multiple product dispensers now. The pumps are actually in the ground, and the cutoff nozzles and the way that those dispensers work, they have an internal mechanical system, which is a mechanical device that by vacuum, by air, automatically shuts those pumps off. So if you're running a pump and it gets stuck on and there's a vacuum system that shuts that pump off when there's fills. That doesn't mean that there aren't failures in systems like that, but that is part of our then operations program that you have to deal with it. We have to notify it, we have to write it, we have to The guy's out there pumping his gas, he's got a truck and he puts 20 gallons in it and it only holds 17, and he says, well, where'd all that gas go? I don't want to pay for it. It's not my fault your system didn't work because I went in the convenience store and bought a cup of coffee. We have to deal with that 3 gallons. We have to tell the government where that 3 gallons went and how we dealt with it. So, generally, they always work. But there are things that happen, and again, that's a visual response, and it's something that we have to manage on site.
The final question, that triple B license, that's only for beer and wine?
Beer and wine packaged to purchase and carry off-site.
No hard liquor?
No hard liquor.
That's all, yeah.
Mr. Chenoweth?
Just a couple of follow-up questions. Mr. Kowalski, will the development as stipulated and agreed upon, does it include curbs into sewers, or is there any place in which there's going to be pavement into grass, basically as an edge, or is it all curbed around, the perimeter, parking lot, so to speak, surface to curb and then into sewers?
I think if what you're asking is the parking lot just going to meet the street curb, and will there be any grass buffer in between the two?
Well, actually, I would prefer there not be a grass buffer. I'm concerned, I don't know whether or not it's stipulated that the developer will develop curbage at the edge of the asphalt surface, or will there be some place in which, because I've seen it both ways, where there isn't a curb, and so the runoff, we have flash floods around here, so if we can get everything to go in the sewer system and treat it that way, that's probably better than it running right off the asphalt into the ground and then seeping through to where the water well is now pumping water.
I see. That's actually probably a better question for Jeff, too.
Okay.
In order to comply with the provisions of the BMP, the Best Management Practice under Phase 2 of the Clean Water Act, they discourage curbs. They want the water to run across the grass. It is a natural filtration methodology for things such as that. And it's not only just the hydrocarbons, it's also dirt and things like that. Think about it like this. In order for, let's say that you have an oil spill, and you're out working in your yard and your car leaks some oil. When the rains come and stuff like that, the way that oil moves, it'll stay right there. The way that oil moves, if the sun doesn't get rid of it, is that it'll be picked up by the water and it'll be carried across the surfaces on top of the water, not in the water, but on top of the water. As the water perks into the ground, the oils will not go with it. They can't attach to the water molecules and go down in the soils with it. What would happen is that the surface area where it penetrated could be contaminated for a period of time, but in general what will happen is the sun will dispense all of that, because by the natural reaction of the sun onto those products, it'll go away. So the choice, as far as the Clean Water Act that was put into place, is to try to use as many natural methodologies to deal with things. Those are the most guaranteed and the most appropriate for the type of system that we're installing. We are trying to design this so that we have a large area of grass that will do that type of a job for us. And if it doesn't, you see oil slicks and things like that lay on top of the ground. You can't deny where they exist, and we will be, under our provisions with EPA, we have to watch those things. So, the problem with brownfields and things like that, again, are direct pours onto site and systems that failed because of old technologies.
And does that mean that you'll be keeping a number of the trees that are on site there as a part of that natural filtration process?
In actuality, the trees don't help us.
They don't?
Well, they do 3 things. Number one, a lot of trees are very scrub trees anyway on that site, so they're not a very good system. We will be planning the site, we'll be meeting and exceeding the landscape requirements of the city. But in general, we can't get light to any kind of volatiles that may end up on the site if we have a lot of trees that block them. So we have to be somewhat cautious about how we design the system.
That's all.
Any other questions? Want any action
No
tonight?
action,
So we'll see this again in 2 weeks after we have the public hearing at 7:20?
7:20, yeah.
On that Monday, May the 3rd.
Mayor?
Yeah, Ms. Chenoweth?
Could I request then that staff place into the agreement the language that we discussed, but the petitioner agreed to, and I proposed that was in the Plan Commission notes, roughly, I believe the petitioner will put in a double-walled tank with double-walled piping and a chase. There will also be electronic monitoring wells or something of the like in the agreement when it comes back to us in 2 weeks.
And the one that we discussed.
And the liquor license.
Well,
Or the other one on the
filter, yeah.
best
The
management.
best
Right.
management practices.
Thank you.
With those changes, we'll see that in 2 weeks then. Next, we have item 2 under new business, an ordinance approving a special use permit request by Champaign County to establish a nursing home in the CRE, Conservation, Recreation, and Education Zoning District at 500 South Art Martell Road, plan case number 188-SU-04.
Thank you. This is a request by Champaign County for a special use permit for the new Champaign County nursing home. The new nursing home would replace the existing nursing home at the corner of Learman and Main Street in Urbana. But yet it would not be built at the same spot, but at another location on the Champaign County East Campus, a little more interior to the campus, just north of Prairie Park and just west of the newly proposed Weaver Park. The land is zoned CRE, Conservation, Recreation, and Education. A nursing home per se is not permitted in that zoning district, although our zoning ordinance does have provisions to allow any government building, especially one with a charitable purpose, to be allowed in any zoning district with the granting of a special use permit. Your staff report outlines the proposal a little bit on the nursing home. Again, I guess just to reiterate, the nursing home facility is the services will not increase, although the new facility is needed, and that is the result of the 2 referendums that was passed back in 2002. It's a 243-bed nursing home with skilled care facility, Alzheimer's care unit, adult and child daycare. Certificate of need has currently been issued by the state of Illinois, which limits the capacity of the development to 243 beds. As far as the site plan, you'll see a site plan in your packet also, which outlines the access and parking to the developments. There will be an extension of Art Bartell Road, which is a north-south street, currently dead ends in the middle of the campus. It'll be extended south to serve the nursing home. And then an east-west street will also be extended that connects to Learman. And there are 2 different parking lots proposed. One will be more for employee spaces and one more for visitor spaces, but it's well over the requirements of what our ordinance requires for a nursing home. Stormwater management is an interesting component of this proposal. There is a lot of work that has been done on making the Scottswood drainage detention basin a reality. This would be a new detention basin in the the southeast corner of Weaver Park that would primarily serve as relieving a lot of flooding problems in the Scottswood subdivision on Illinois Street where it ends into the park. It is proposed that the nursing home development as well as other areas of the East Campus would drain into that new basin, which would eventually be an amenity for the new park as well. This is a multi-jurisdictional effort going on with the city, the township, the county, and the park district. We are expecting the release of grant money, a CDAP grant, for the first phase of construction for that basin. However, in the meantime, to accommodate for the construction of the nursing home, the county and the park district is finishing up a temporary agreement that would provide for interim storage for stormwater runoff until the detention is officially designed and completed. That work is being done by Burns Clancy to design that right now. So there won't be any on-site detention for the nursing home, and it'll be provided for on the park next door. The Plan Commission had a public hearing on April 8th to consider the requirements for the special use permit, and those are listed in your staff report as well as the findings from their from their hearing, and they did recommend approval of the case with 3 conditions. The first one, which is pretty standard, is that the construction of the facility closely resemble the site plan. I don't think that's going to be a problem because they're pretty far along with the design and the construction plans already for the developments. Number 2 is that, which is also well underway, is that the intergovernmental agreement with the different agencies be solidify this Scottswood detention basin. And then finally is that the construction plans for Art Bartel Drive be reviewed by the Urbana City Engineer. Under our subdivision code and ordinance, that road would be required to meet the city standards for a public street, although it is not proposed to be public at this time, but it still needs to meet those standards. Your application should have, or you should have received a pretty complete application package from the county a few weeks ago, which has a lot of detail about the facility, and it was very useful. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Kowalski?
Just one question. What will happen to the existing nursing home, and will that continue to remain county property? Are they looking at developing it, selling it? What's the kind of future plan there?
It would remain as county-owned property. I believe they're looking at that site as redevelopment or perhaps partial redevelopment of parts of the older building that is not feasible to renovate. I can't speak to their current plans for reuse of part of that building or the site, though.
It'd be nice to see some private development in that area since there's such a stretch of government development, and they have quite a bit of property in which to work. But I can be wishful thinking, I guess.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, a motion would be in order.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
That motion with the staff recommendations?
Yeah, the motion was...
Yes.
There's no discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 7 ayes. Next, we have an ordinance amending the zoning map of the city of Urbana, Illinois, rezoning for 395 North Race Street from IN Industrial to B4 Central Business. This was Plan Case 1885-M-04. Ms. Bell?
Thank you. This is a case brought by the zoning administrator to rezone 395 North Race Street from industrial to B4 Central Business. The owner of this property right now, Alan Strong, is also the owner of Silver Creek Restaurant directly across the street. He bought this property about a year ago and entered into a redevelopment agreement with the city to redevelop the site for a new banquet center and retail bakery/coffee shop. And part of that redevelopment agreement was for the zoning administrator to put forth this petition for a rezoning. The property was identified as a key redevelopment area in 3 community plans, the TIF District 2 plan, Downtown Strategic Plan, and the Urbana Comprehensive Plan. All the plans essentially summarize that the need to redevelop underutilized areas in the downtown area to encourage retail businesses such as those in the redevelopment agreement. Also to encourage businesses in the downtown that are compatible with other downtown businesses to strengthen our Urbana core. Staff and the Plan Commission felt that the site is ripe for redevelopment and rezoning to a land use classification more appropriate for this parcel in our downtown area. The existing industrial zoning really isn't compatible with current business trends or with our community goals identified in our plans. The parcel doesn't contain desirable amenities for most industrial development today and would be more appropriately downzoned to a B4 Central Business District. The Plan Commission did meet on April 8th and voted 7-0 to recommend approval of the requested rezoning to the City Council, and the summary of those findings are outlined in your memo. You have the following options in this case: to approve the rezoning to B4 Central Business, or to deny the rezoning to B4 Central Business, and staff does concur with the Plan Commission's decision to recommend approval of this plan case. And I'll take any questions regarding this case.
Any questions at this point? Questions? A motion would be in order?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, Ms. Wyman?
I just want to note that Alison Kingston, whose property abuts the proposed rezoning, says she has no objection to this.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Whalen?
at the time that this was first proposed, or the effect of the change in the property, Ms. Kingston spoke to us, and personally I felt like I often feel, and it's surprised you as a Republican, but the little people need a defender, and the weak voices need a defender. And I support development and business always, and without restraint. However, I do and will continue to speak out for the people who don't have the representation that they need. And so consequently, I'm so glad to get that letter from Ms. Kingston that said that she will contribute, she will go work with the developer, and I'm pleased to see that this will be done in harmony. I hope that the developer will also consider her interests in that for her domestic harmony and peace.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Whalen. Any other discussion? There's no discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Hoof? Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 7 ayes. And lastly, under new business, we have a resolution authorizing the city to intervene in the Ameren and Illinois Power merger case at the Illinois Commerce Commission. Mr. Holtz?
Yes, very briefly, this is an Illinois Commerce Commission matter basically dealing with the Ameren proposal to purchase the Illinois Power System. My memo kind of gives an overview of that. In a lot of ways, a lot of people think that Ameren would be a good fit. That can be true, and it may or may not be true, depending on exactly how things are set up. What's really important for us at this point, we feel, is to be a party at the table at the negotiations that happen ultimately between the Illinois Commerce Commission and Ameren and other interested parties, so that our voices are heard there. That's the point of this intervention. I should note also that that's part of the point of the $100,000 that the city of Urbana, together with the city of Champaign and the University of Illinois, budgeted for having consultant advice on these electric issues. Those things go hand in hand, and our hope is that by being a part of that process, we can make sure that the local needs are addressed and that Ameren spends the kind of money on the kinds of things that are needed here. I should note as well that since this is a resolution that it has not come by way of a committee, we need to have a vote to override the requirement of the resolution on resolutions. Was that a vote of 5?
Yeah, I think all we need to do is just pass it with a supermajority of 5,
Right.
yeah, rather than 4. Just to add, we have spoken with the Ameren folks, and they are aware that we're going to be intervening, not as hostile interveners, but as collaborators in this merger to try to make sure our interests are met through the merger and the coming of Ameren's ownership of the Illinois Power System. Any questions for Mr. Holtz?
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, Ms. Wyman?
I just want to express my appreciation to staff for continuing their work on this. I think it's important not only to show Ameren that we're interested and concerned about this, but also with the Illinois Commerce Commission and follow this as closely as possible, since these the work that Ameren will be doing, or their involvement is going to have long-term and profound effects on the city of Urbana and its residents. And just I support continued involvement in this effort.
Any other comments? Any others? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion. Go back now to old business. First under old business is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the city of Urbana, Illinois, with respect to the standards and regulations for the B1 Neighborhood Business Zoning District, plan case 1878-T-04.
Thank you. This is a tabled item from your March 15th meeting. You'll recall it was presented to you after 3 different meetings with the Plan Commission. The text amendment to the B1 zoning ordinance is something we've been working on for quite some time. At the March 15th meeting, there was some direction from council to get more input from business owners, property owners in the B1 zoning district, and anybody else about the changes, and make sure we've heard all different views and got a lot of input. We had that open house Wednesday of last week. It was sponsored by council members Chenoweth and Huth, and we had it here. I think we had about 20 to 25 people come out, people ranging from property owners of B1 property, residents, business owners, and there was a lot of good comment and discussion after we presented the proposed changes. I think the biggest comment that was offered was one on the allowed square footage for some of the uses in the B1 zone by right. We were proposing that some uses that are now a conditional use permit process be approved by right if it is 2,500 square feet or less. And a lot of comments were that that was really too small to for any practical proposal to build a business, especially if you're talking about a clean site. So there's some changes to be presented tonight that address that. So since the last meeting in March, we've had the open house. Staff has had a chance to discuss some comments more, and then more specifically, council member Chenoweth and others have put together some suggested changes to the ordinance that was presented to you in March, and those were handed out to you tonight. And I want to just real briefly go over and tell you what the changes are. They're in the strike-through and underlined format. So this is a document that says alternative ordinance presented on April 19, 2004, up in the top left corner. On the second page, although there are no page numbers, but on under Section 1 is the provision that we had about adding drive-through facilities as being having some further level of review, and we propose that those be reviewed under a conditional use permit, and that is proposed to be changed to be reviewed under a special use permit, which is just a slightly higher level of review. Looking on the next page in Section 4, Section 5, a new section is proposed to be added to permit 2 new uses by right in the B1 Neighborhood Business Zoning District, and that is a bed and breakfast inn and a bed and breakfast owner occupied. Those would now be permitted by right, whereas currently the code does not allow them in the district at all. What is now Section 6 is a section that specifically deletes some uses from being allowed in the B1 Neighborhood Business Zoning District, and it is proposed that principal use parking lot or garage now be prohibited from that district. Section 7 specifies uses that are allowed only by a special use permit, and in addition to the ones that were listed there before, it's proposed that gasoline station, dry cleaner, retail liquor sales, indoor theater, and motion picture production studio be added. So those are permitted only with a special use permit review. Section 8 lists uses that are allowed with a conditional use permit review, and that is a check cashing service and laundry and dry cleaning pickup. Those were not specified prior, or I'm sorry, were specified. I think they were permitted by right prior in the B1 zone. Now they're conditional use proposed. And then Section 9 is lists the uses that are allowed in the B1 zone with a conditional use permit, but by right, when the gross square footage of the use is 3,500 square feet or less per floor. So the 3,500 square foot is the increase from the 2,500 square foot, and then the new language was added per floor. And those are listed below, and some of them are struck, such as cafe, restaurant, dry cleaning, and laundry establishment, because they are, well, those are struck, and I'll talk about those in Section 10. Dancing school was added to that list, by the way. Okay, Section 10, I know this is a little confusing, but Section 10 lists the uses that are allowed by right when the square footage is 3,500 square feet or less by floor, and by a special use when the gross square footage is 3,500 square feet or greater per floor. And that is supermarket or grocery store and video store. The only other change that was proposed relates to signs, freestanding signs. Currently a 32 square foot, I'm sorry, this is under Section 12. Currently a 32 square foot sign is permitted per frontage in the B1 zoning district. So if you have a corner lot, such as the gas station we discussed, you have two frontages and a 32 square foot sign is permitted on each frontage. It would propose that that be reduced down to just allowing one sign. The new language would allow just one sign, or if the builder prefers, they can have one sign per frontage, but only 16 square feet per sign. So the total area of the signage is not increased, but two signs would be permitted. Okay, if you got all that, those are the changes. Be happy to answer any questions again, and this council member Chenoweth really helped put this together, so she can answer too.
Just briefly, in walking through this, there's one thing that's different from, there's a correction I'd like to make, and that is if you look at under Section 8, laundry and dry cleaning pickup, you might ask the question, what's the difference between that and dry cleaner? Well, the difference is really the pickup part, but the concept is the same, and actually laundry and dry cleaning pickup should be under dry cleaner, which would be something only allowed by special use. So if council members could kind of take and bump laundry and dry cleaning pickup and put it underneath dry cleaner and have it treated in the same way, that would correct that one. Otherwise, I didn't see any particular corrections. And once there's a motion on the floor, I'll go ahead and speak to this, but we'll open up for questions.
Right now, Ms. Wyman.
I just want to clarify with the signage issue, if there are two stories or for example, two different businesses, one on a first floor and one on a second floor, something like that, is it accurate to say that there would still only be one sign allowed unless it, of course, had two frontages?
Typically, yeah, we would require that they have only one sign per frontage.
Thank you.
Mr. Polsky, I had a question on, I guess it relates to the new Section 10. And on my draft of this, cafe and restaurant are lined out, but it looks like in ink. Is that intended, or are they supposed to be there under Section 10?
Yeah, that's part of the proposal also, that cafe and restaurant only be allowed by special use permit regardless of their square footage, whether they're 3,500 or greater. So that's a change from what was printed out.
So where is that listed? So they're but special use only, and so that would be Section 7?
I'm sorry, conditional use permit.
That's the way it is now in the ordinance.
Yeah, it's
Right.
keeping everything.
Okay,
else.
Right,
that's the way it is now.
so those don't change.
Just for clarification on the sign question, I just step back to ask Ms. Tyler, and maybe Rob, you can help with this. The 32 square foot limitation is for a freestanding sign, but in addition, a business can still have a wall sign or a window sign, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And is there any restriction on size or number of wall signs or window signs?
Well, the restriction is based on square footage, 10% of the wall area.
Not another statement in there that if the business is based in the neighborhood, then they couldn't have that wall sign?
If the side of the building directly faces a residential use or zone, then they can't have a wall sign on there. Not if it's across the street, but if it's directly next to a house or an apartment building or something like that.
Any other questions? Gentlemen?
I'll make the motion, make the motion for approval.
Second.
Okay, so you were moving this alternate
Alternative
ordinance
ordinance.
with that change that you'd made, which was to put laundry and dry cleaning pickup from Section 8 into Section 7.
That's correct.
Second, Ms. Chairman?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is an important vote. It's an important vote to me, in part because I think we really have an opportunity as a city to add to the number of locations that would allow for small businesses. And so we're trying to do that, and we're trying to do it in a way that's appropriate with neighborhoods. And I really don't think this is perfect at all. And it's been a very frustrating process. Plan Commission had 3 meetings on this. City Council, we're now in our second, and I would like to tell council members that it would not hurt my feelings at all if people felt like this is way too much to look at tonight, and if you wanted to move to defer and spend time with it more, that would not bother me. I don't feel any reason to try to push this through quickly, and it should not be pushed through quickly. Ideally, and I hope that after the comprehensive plan is released, that we'll look at zoning in an entirely different way. And all of the arguments we've had over this have really been old uses, new uses, core, periphery, and it really makes no sense to have the same kind of zonage use in the core as we have in the periphery, and yet we want this kind of neighborhood business in the periphery. So ideally, we would have this kind of concentric circle donut looking thing, and lots of things would be permitted. We would try to be as least restrictive as possible, but instead of restricting things by use, which gets into all kinds of trouble, people want to open a certain kind of store and there's just not land available in Urbana to do it. And so as a result, we miss out on the opportunity to have that kind of business come to our town. That's what the current way of doing zoning, it's kind of one of the consequences, unfortunate consequences. Ideally, we could have more permissive zoning, allow more kinds of things, but using design standards, using hours of operation limitations, lighting limitations, having lights turn off in the middle of the night in some areas, all of these things, that allowing liquor in some areas and not others, these are things that we've been told this tool that we have called zoning doesn't allow us to do. So basically we're trying to fix a bicycle, with a lollipop or a straw, and that's how I feel like I'm doing every day. It's like, this doesn't fit, this is not the way to do this. Our staff knows this. We've inherited codes that were, built in the 60s and 70s with totally different idea in mind. They wanted the cities to sprawl everywhere. Our city didn't necessarily do that, but our code is built for it. And so we really, we probably have to, after the comp plan, overhaul the way we do zoning, and, that's a 3-year process or 5-year process or whatever. So what we have now is we're trying to fix the bicycle with the lollipop, and it's not perfect. I think that one of the things that could go in tandem with this is for us to look at our B2 zone, B2 arterial. I know Mr. Kowalski said that was for Springfield, but some of the things that we're looking at, some of the things that are Zone B1 really shouldn't be Zone B1, like Behringer Commons, North Lincoln Avenue, some areas potentially even on Vine Street don't really they're not really B1. They're much more of, they're near neighborhoods, it's true, but they're usually near more intensive residential uses or business office uses, and they're on arterial streets, and they should be zoned differently. So with that in mind, I've been trying to think of kind of neighborhoods and not necessarily the locations where B1 is currently, and think about what do we want in neighborhoods, our new neighborhoods where the scale is larger, as well as in our old neighborhoods where the scale tends to be smaller. With that said, there were just a couple of things. I know Ms. Pat raised her eyebrow about bed and breakfast. I just want to call to council members' attention, if you look in your table of uses, bed and breakfast is permitted by right in every business zone except B1, and it's conditional use in every residential area except, I think, even R2 in the single family. So it's almost like it's an oversight that in B1 it's not allowed. It seemed to make sense to include that in. We've heard a lot from residents about principal use parking lots or garages. One of the whole goals is to make this something palatable to residents and open to businesses, make it easy for people to start businesses. Anything under 3,500 square feet for a number of uses would then be permitted by right, which I think helps businesses feel like there aren't a lot of hoops they have to go through to start things. But there are certain things that really make it difficult to locate a B1 in a neighborhood, and those are convenience stores, gas stations, drive-through facilities, principal use parking, which means it's not parking related to a business, the parking is the business. And so we've tried to, without necessarily cutting out all of those things, cut out some things that we really feel would never really be appropriate. And in other cases, for example, a drive-through bakery might be something, or a drive-through catering, or these kind of lunch boxes that you can buy at places like Strawberry Fields or et cetera. A drive-through might be appropriate for something. So we don't want to be too restrictive. So that's where some of those changes came from. The check cashing services, I asked about this. It wasn't in the original proposal. Check cashing service really means payday loan place. And payday loan place means lots of quick in and outs, lots of gaudy signs, fairly intensive lighting, etc. And so I thought that it probably needed to be conditional use rather than permitted by right. Indoor theater is something that was not allowed at all in B1, but we have several examples of small black box theaters in this community, and it seems to make sense that with some with a special use permit, meaning that it has to go through some reviews, that a dinner theater, a black box theater, something neighborhood scale would make sense. Dry cleaners, this actually came from a business owner who has worked with small businesses for a number of years, helped to manage to get small businesses in. He explained that dry cleaners use some of the most toxic chemicals known to humankind, and that actually the kinds of chemicals that dry cleaners use is very similar to industrial uses, that in no other kind of business practice are there the same kind of chemicals. They're not just like cleaning chemicals, they're actually more like industrial chemicals. And he said that in his experience, they oftentimes found their way into soil, parking lot, toilets, etc., and that they really needed to have a very high degree of regulation. And he had suggested that it be put in the special use category, and I think that that's appropriate, so it was done so. I believe dancing school was not included in B1 at all. I've included it simply because it seems to be the kind of use that with a conditional use over a certain size would be appropriate within a neighborhood. The issue about size is that in talking to people, 2,500 square feet was really not industry standard, and people need to understand, council members need to understand that includes all the business uses, primary business uses like an office space that's related to the retail. So 2,500 square feet probably is okay if that is your floor for your merchandise, but that's not really what was being talked about. So we felt as though expanding that to allow for it to be 3,500 square feet. I think there were some developers in the audience who talked about that being more of an industry standard for small businesses, and that seemed to work. And then also, I think that we should try to encourage double floor neighborhood businesses where appropriate. We already have a height restriction, I think, of 35 feet, so we're not going to see over 2 or potentially 3 floors, but as it was written before, 2,500 square feet really was for, if it was 2 stories, it would really have to be more like 1,250 square feet per floor. So this allows for people to build up and have offices upstairs and then the retail space down below. And I think this is the kind of new urbanist philosophy that I think we would like to promote in our neighborhoods. The one thing that I feel is not yet adequate with this, and I don't exactly know what to do with it, and I don't have a proposal, so maybe we'll go forward, and when we see a bunch of fences going up everywhere, we'll be unhappy that we made this decision and make a different decision. But as stated, as amended by staff, there would need to be a 6-foot-high wood or masonry fence all the way to the end of the property line. So we're talking about all the way to the sidewalk. There are visibility issues with people getting out of their driveway and someone walking by and being hit because they can't be seen by the fence. I think that it's probably unnecessary that they have a fence all the way to the sidewalk. in most cases, but in some cases it would be. So I would hope that staff would encourage petitioners to request variances when needed, because simply if they have a large setback of their business, it really doesn't make and the neighbor has a large setback, or even an average setback, there's no reason for the fence to kind of go all the way up. And I think that it will be kind of visually polluting to our neighborhoods to have these fences that go all the way to the sidewalk. There's not a convenient way. Again, it's the the lollipop method. It's not really, there's not a convenient way to change that currently, but I think we can encourage people to request variances when it makes sense. And I would hope that we're not just encouraging lots of 6-foot-tall fences to be put up everywhere, so that we have this very this particular look that we don't currently have in Urbana, where things are kind of open visually. So with that said, I just want to explain some of the changes and some of my concerns, and I hope you would either support this or defer it and spend some time on it yourselves and add things to it.
Any other discussion? Yes, Ms. Wyman.
I think this looks okay. Actually, regarding the comment I wanted to make was regarding the 6-foot-high wood fence or masonry. I think that one of the important issues when we have, especially a neighborhood business right next to residential, or whether it's an R1, R2, R6, or any other zoning district, is the buffer in between. And I think that having some sort of fence is often appropriate and often very needed, and is, I think, in many situations much better than some shrubs or some bushes, which we encourage or which we provide for in ordinances as another form of buffering. I think that the wood fence allows for the buffer with regard, especially when you don't have regulated by hours, when cars pull up for the business, so that they don't shine into the windows of the residential neighbors. Issues like that, I think, are important. So I think that actually the wood fence or the masonry is going to be appropriate if the proposed business wants to ask for a variance saying that the wood fence or the masonry is not necessary or is not necessary to the right to the property line. I think that's fine, and then that variance request will also allow the adjoining properties, the next door properties, and down the line to have notice of this and to be able to say, yes, that's appropriate, or it's okay to not have the fence, or no, it's really important because look at what the use is going to be. It's going to be open till midnight, or it's going to be open, or it's going to have this amount of lighting. And so I think it does, requiring it so that a proposed business would have to ask for variance, I think will be appropriate and will hopefully satisfy the needs of residential neighbors. Thank you.
Can I add a quick comment? This might help a little bit also. We require permits for fences, and when we review those, we make sure that there's always a site visibility. So a fence would never usually would not be able to be built right up to the property line if it's right along a driveway or something that could create a harmful situation. So.
Thank you. One more thing about fences. I believe one of our goals in asking for this plan case to be initiated by the staff was to make it easier to establish neighborhood businesses in close proximity to residential. And the main issue, more than their size, more than anything else, is the buffer or lack of buffer between the residential use and the business use. So I think that there is no reason to be concerned about this fence requirement. I think it will serve the positive purpose of making business more acceptable to neighboring residential or neighboring residents, and I think it's a good thing. And the Plan Commission spent a long time discussing it and trying to get it right. So I think it'll be okay and a positive thing.
For discussion.
I just wanted to thank staff for helping to pull together the meeting that we had here last week, and also thank Ms. Chenoweth because she put in a great deal of time trying to juggle the interests of a lot of different people, which I know is not always an easy task. So thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing no more discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto? Mr. Otto?
Oh, yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 7 ayes. And lastly, on our agenda this evening, an ordinance redistricting the wards of the city of Urbana. And let's see. I don't know, Steve, if you have anything, any comments on this? This is drawn up at the direction of the council from the last meeting. And you can see the block by block description, more or less, of each of the proposed wards, the whereases, and I guess one thing to note would be the effective date, which would be, the concept would be that the new wards would take effect as far as sitting council members when the new council is elected and sworn into office, and so that all of you elected in your wards would, up until the next election, and the new council being sworn in would elect your current, would represent your current ward. And that, of course, the people running in the new wards would have to meet the statutory requirements for residency and so forth. And Steve, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that pretty well sums it up. Otherwise, it does no more than enact the ward boundaries that are, I think, the ones that our council seems to have a consensus on. I should note that the word description was prepared by the engineering department, and the ordinance is set that the word description, the verbal description of these boundaries, governs if there's a conflict between the verbal description and the map's depiction. So we've had a few people check it over. I don't know if anybody else has looked it over, if there's any errors that have been found. I think engineering worked pretty hard on it.
Any other questions, Ms. Pat?
Thank you. I checked over, it looked right to me. I would just like confirmation that the verbal description includes the Galladay tract in Ward 7, even though the map does not. Is that, that's my understanding. It's just hard to know what the description is for the southern boundary of that. The map still shows the southern boundary, I'm sorry, southern boundary on the east side as being Colorado. I think it's the language that says, with the east line of the northeast quarter of Section 21, Township 19, North, Range 9, East.
Which line are you at?
Oh, I'm sorry, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's 8, mainly because that's not familiar language to me, so I'm guessing that's the description, but I wasn't sure.
That would be the language where that's described, and, you know, the map right now would be Colorado Avenue, and it certainly does not say Colorado Avenue there.
Right.
Um,
That was the way I interpreted it, but I just wanted to confirm that since I don't know where Range 9 East is and all that, that those 4 lines are describing the area that we just annexed. Yes, that's the description of it. Okay. And there's no street name because the street's not
There's no street
in yet.
there.
Right.
Section line of the street doesn't go all the way through here, so it's grass section.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm that and point that out to everyone if you're looking at the map, that where there's a little white box that's still not, has not been annexed, just north of Eagle Ridge, that's around the bottom line of that, if you extended the line to match up with, to be parallel to Colorado, that's about the area.
Nearly to Stone Creek Boulevard. Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, a motion would be in order.
Move approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Whalen.
Just a curiosity, the ward that I represent, 6, does not meet the Supreme Court requirements of compactness and contiguity. Contiguity, yes, but not compactness, certainly. And I think it would behoove us to remember, I'm living with this ward pretty much the way it is now. It's very difficult to get around and represent the people because I don't drive through those areas every day. And in order to see what's going on, I have to make a special trip. And a lot of it's out of my way. I'm not just thinking of myself for re-election. I'm thinking of representing the people. And I think that's what should be in our minds first and foremost. And this certainly does not allow a proper representation of the people. I know that the Democrat Party has, the members have control of all the other wards, and it seems to me like this is where they've put pretty much every Republican in town, although that's probably not true. But what it does, it would guarantee pretty much a Republican re-election. But that's not the point. I don't mind running in an area that is particular, that might not be friendly to me. It might be, the majority might be Democrat, because my concern is representation and adequate representation. If you can overcome that party, affinity, perhaps, then maybe we can rise above that kind of thing. I know it's hard to think of and hard to imagine. Gee whiz, look at the state legislature and which side of the aisle and the Congress, and we all know the political emotion and the battles that go on for power. And it's appropriate to strive for power because by having the power, it gives us the opportunity to do the things we want to do. And I think, for the most part, that what we want to do is good. And I say that here, too. I see a lot coming from the majority of this council, which I think is very noble. And I call this the city of the big heart, rather than the city of, Tree City. I think it's much more appropriate. And I congratulate you folks for your persistence in following those humane goals. And I'm glad to be a part of that. But at the same time, I do think that the Ward 6 does not meet Supreme Court guidelines, and consequently, I would like to make a motion on the floor here to take that area, if you look in the purple area, west of Philo Road down to Windsor. That little purple finger that sticks out that includes Shirts and Willard Scoville, and make that part of the 7th Ward, and consequently make the area up above where Thomas Paine School is a part of the 6th Ward. Now, 6th Ward has no school in it now, but that would give it a school, and it would align that part of the area where, as a representative, I think any representative would probably come from mostly around up by Washington, but it could be down in Myra Ridge. But in any case, they could then travel through a neighborhood without any break in continuity and represent that. And so I would make that motion to move this area down below, as I mentioned, including McHenry and to Windsor, and Philo over to what is it? Anderson, thank you. Into the 7th Ward.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. Procedurally, we're on a motion to amend the main motion.
Right, your motion was to amend, Mr.
Yes,
Whitman?
yes.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, well, let me speak to it. I don't think that this is, should be an affront to my colleagues here, the Democrat Party. It's not a purpose. The purpose is not to give any more power to the person in my name in this case presently, but it would meet the requirement that the Supreme Court sets as a guideline for contiguity, and compactness. And really, we should be concerned with representation. The people need those voices of us. I don't mean to sound too dramatic, but take, for example, Alice Ann, who came here. She needed representation. So many of the people that we represent in our different wards come to us and look for succor, look for help with their problems they're having with the city. And it's only appropriate that we be close to that. It's like, almost like I had a family, and my children lived in this house, and my wife lived in this house, and I lived in a third house, and how would we ever get together? I mean, it's just sort of, I know it's a little strange, or it's an unusual kind of comparison, and unlikely. But I think that would serve much more the purpose. Now, there's one other area that's concerned to me, and that is Behringer Commons. And I understand Ms. Huth does not want Behringer Commons in her ward, and that's okay. I mean, I don't object to that. We've discussed this, and she thinks that would be out of the way for her, because and it is. It's out of the way for her, and it's out of the way for me. But I don't mind traveling up that way to be with people. It's a compact neighborhood. But I ask you to reconsider this little finger that takes it out of the 6th Ward, that area where Thomas Paine School is, and accede to my wish to join that to the 6th Ward.
For further discussion, Pat.
Thank you. I looked at that for a long time when I was drawing the map, because it would look more pleasing to the eye if those two tracks were switched. Both of those rectangular areas right now are in Ward 6. But Ward 6 is too big, so one of them has to go. The reason that I drew it this way, there were two reasons actually. One reason is the area from McHenry to Windsor, from Anderson to Philo, is in the same precinct as the area directly on the other side of Philo Road. So by drawing it this way, we split one fewer precinct. If we were to do the switch that Mr. Whalen suggests, we'd be splitting yet another precinct, and it's one of the highest turnout precincts. We split a number of precincts on this map that's impossible to avoid, but the degree to which the larger turnout precincts are not split, that's better. The other reason has to do with the whole issue of potential growth. Unlike 10 years ago when the City Council made Ward 6 much larger by population than any of the other wards, and made my ward and Ms. Wyman's ward much smaller, and actually Ward 4 much smaller than the other ones. This map does it the other way around. It gives Ward 6 the smaller population and Wards 1 and 4 a larger population. But also by avoiding splitting Precinct 23 and instead extending the boundary of Ward 7 across Philo Road following Precinct 21, both Precincts 21 and 23 cross Philo Road, that also creates the opportunity to include the new annexation, the Galladay tract that we were just talking about initially, in Ward 7. I guess it wouldn't be impossible to include it in Ward 7, but to do that, it would be another finger sticking out. So this, doing it the way it is on the map that you see, has the two advantages of including the new annexation in Ward 7 and avoiding splitting one more precinct. And that is the reason that I do not support the motion to amend.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Chenoweth?
Mr. Rowland, do you, I know with both the mayor and Ms. Pat, they brought to us information about how their proposals affect population balances between the wards, and it's difficult for me, it's not a partisan reason at all, but it's difficult for me to support a motion that's made on the floor without that kind of data. So for example, it seems that what you're talking about makes sense, you know, kind of visually, but I know that around Thomas Paine School and Lowman Park area, there's not a lot of population, whereas there's quite a bit of population in the area that you're swapping for. One of the things we've talked about is to try to have the population lower in 6 so that growth can occur in that area without, you know, the dilution of votes in the area, which I think is the good thing to do for the kind of, for democratic values that we all share. And so my question to you is whether or not you know how many people you're adding via your proposal.
That's a good question. If I may answer.
Yes, Mr. Whalen.
That's a good question, Daniel. I'm not sure of the number. And I do see, I mean, graphically on the map that there seems to be more population in that precinct down there on Windsor Road. However, what we're looking at up here on Washington, up by the school, there's quite a number of houses up there too. They're not shown. They face on Florida Avenue, and I imagine. Pardon me. I imagine that down in along an extension of Colorado, there will be more houses too, and so I'm not sure of the number. I'm not sure it's that critical though.
Well, just to answer in part, I don't have the information right in front of me, but it's also something that I looked at, and the numbers are very similar. The real population that you get in the part, that finger of 7 that goes into 6, is in the Sunnycrest and Sunnycrest 2 apartments, where there's pretty high density population. So it's very comparable. I don't know, I see Ms. Pat's got some maps out. Did you have?
It's about they're pretty close. Yeah, it would be. I mean, you'd be making Ward 6 a little smaller, but it's you know, a little bit under 500, a little bit over 500 are the differences between those two areas.
It's not significant enough to make as far as the population is concerned. Is there further discussion?
I'll just continue with that.
Or do you have more to add to
Well,
your
just to say that, you know, Sunnycrest 2 apartments are probably would tend to be more Democrat. I'm thinking there's a lot of Section 8 housing in there, and you know, that doesn't bother me at all. I mean, you can look at my record, and if you don't like what I've done and might do, then don't vote for me. That's the way I feel. And I think that's the way we all feel. We're all trying to do a good job here. And again, I compliment you for your efforts. But I do think that with the fact that the populations are relatively even, that I would ask for your acquiescence in this motion.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Hayes, if you take the chair. Well, I think what Mr. Whalen has suggested is a very common sense improvement to this map. As he says, visually, it makes a lot more sense to make that the boundary between 6 and 7 south of Florida Avenue just be Philo Road, period. And that's what Mr. Whalen's amendment would do. As we said, that the population figures are about equal. It would certainly make 6 far more compact than it is now. I think the big thing about it is that it makes the boundary one that's easy to understand, so that people in South Urbana can say, well, I live east of Philo Road, south of Florida, so therefore I'm in Ward 7 or 6, I can't remember. And if I live on the other side of Philo Road, I live in the other ward. That's very easy to understand, and what we want is to try to make the map easy for people to understand. So I think it's a very, very good improvement to this proposed map, and I think far outweighs the benefits that Ms. Pat was talking about. Splitting one more precinct when you're already splitting, 8 or 10 precincts, doesn't make a lot of difference. The potential growth for an area that was just annexed where there hasn't been a single spade of dirt turned, we don't know exactly when that potential growth in population will actually materialize. And keeping in mind that this map will be in effect for a relatively short period of time. It's only, it's less than 6 years until the next census. And so we can change that. We'll have the data back in probably 7 years, and so we can make changes to this map with new census data in as little as 7 years. And so we're not talking about a decade worth of development. We're talking more closely to half a decade of development. The real reason that the map before you has those 2 protruding fingers into from Ward 6 into 7 and 7 into 6 is for political reasons. The fact is that when Mr. Whalen said it seems like every Republican in town is in Ward 6, that is by design. This is a politically drawn map. The map that this is modeled after, which is the current map, took every pain possible to put as many voting Republicans into Ward 6 as possible. And that's the fact of the matter. And it was so that the Democrats could get control of the city council, and you see it worked. We've got 6 Democrats and 1 Republican. Well, we don't need to resort to that kind of trickery to have a good map. As Democrats, we have a solid majority. We're going to continue to have a solid majority without resorting to the kind of trickery that is being used to put every voting Republican possible into Ward 6. And so for all of those reasons, I think Mr. Whalen's suggestion is an excellent one.
Thank you, Mayor.
Further discussion? Further discussion on this amendment? If seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Let's see a show of hands. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All opposed? That motion fails. Further discussion on the main motion. Mr. Otto.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to include that part of Ward 6 that's sort of commonly known as Behringer Commons. Basically, the finger that's sticking up from Ward 6 north of Washington Street from Ward 6 into Ward 5, and to keep the population balanced, to move the 3 blocks between Race and Cedar and south of California and north of Washington from Ward 5 into Ward 4, and then to balance back out the population, to move the 2 blocks from Anderson to Lynn and from Washington down to Fairlawn into Ward 6. The population of each of those parcels is roughly 150. It ranges from 130 to 150. And I'm making the motion, well, I guess first we'll see if there's a second.
Second.
Okay, if I can speak my motion then.
Sure.
Making the motion for two reasons. One is it accommodates me. Ward 7 is being carved up. I would like to continuing representing one part of Ward 7. The northern part of Ward 7 is being districted in to Ward 4, and I have purchased a house that is currently right across the street on the corner of Oregon and Cedar on the northeast corner from where Ms. Pat's map draws the line. Making this change would allow the house that I have under contract and expect to purchase on that corner, part of Ward 4. This amendment would also have the salutary effect of reducing the sprawl that we currently have on Ward 6, where we have a thumb going down to Myra Ridge and a finger going across Philo Road, and another sort of index finger reaching up to grab the triangle there between Philo Road and Florida, and then a pinky reaching up to grab Behringer Commons. I think Mr. Whalen's point that this is a ward that will be very difficult to represent is a good one, and I think that the change that I've suggested would result in a much more fair and equitable map, and I'll plainly confess would also have the effect of putting me into Ward 4, which would be vacant, and is where I would like to have the house that I'm purchasing districted into.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Chenoweth?
For the sake of the press, I'll repeat what I said the last time, which is I still don't have an answer from you, Mr. Otto, as to why I should support gerrymandering you into a ward that I've represented for 4 years, have a listserv, a set of contacts, know every voter in the ward, have knocked on 600 doors when I ran for election, and have an entire base of support. I was asked I was asked for the sake of good government to be districted into Ward 2, and it took me a long time to come to the place that I'm at, which is that I'm fine with being districted into Ward 2, having to create a whole new listserv, a whole new set of contacts, going door to door, basically essentially starting from scratch in the next election, going door to door, except that I have a little bit of voting history. So I don't understand why I or this council would support gerrymandering you into Ward 4 and not doing that for me. I'm not currently requesting that. I don't want it. I don't think it's good government. I am, and I can't support it. I'm sorry that you made a mistake. I'm sorry that you bought a house thinking it was Ward 5 and thinking that it was Ward 4 and found out that it's Ward 5 after you signed a contract. I was 5 hours away from signing a contract on Ray Street for a house when I spoke with Mr. Waller, and he told me that if I bought that house, which was half a block outside of my ward, that I would be considered abandoning my ward and that I would be kicked off of council. That house was half the price of the house that I ended up having to purchase after my landlord did not renew my lease during my council term. So I've had to go through significant hardship in the process of this ward map, and I still have not heard from Mr. Otto as to why I would gerrymander him into Ward 4 and not myself. And I I don't understand how you could describe this to the paper as a courtesy when, Mr. Otto, you did not give us the courtesy of actually asking council members before you signed a legal document whether or not they'd be interested in gerrymandering a map for you for the next election.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes, I'm going to oppose the motion to amend. The description that Mr. Otto gave, as I understood it, is basically the description of Mayor Satterthwaite's map as he introduced it 2 weeks ago, which, as Mr. Otto states, has stated again for us, it would move the house that he is under contract to purchase into his own, into a ward where he would not face an incumbent. Mr. Otto, as he's admitted, I believe, had a copy of this proposed map and the boundaries for Ward 4 and Ward 5 more than 6 months ago, and that was certainly long before he signed a contract to purchase, according to the information I've read in the newspaper regarding his proposed move. I don't think that it is appropriate policy for the city to make gerrymandering of the wards simply for the personal privilege of one person, especially after that 6 months after that person received a copy of the proposed map, signed a contract, and I disagree with the policy, in addition to the way that the map would end up changing the wards in general, including Ward 5. And if I understand it, if the description Mr. Otto gave is the same as Mayor Satterthwaite's description from 2 weeks ago, would significantly would significantly change Ward 2 as well. Thank you.
Just to clarify, Mr. Otto, that was not my understanding of your motion. Do you want to describe it a little more clearly, because
I did not propose any changes to Ward 2. The only changes that, the only wards that would change under my motion are Wards 4, 5, and 6. And basically the area north of Florida Avenue that's currently in Ward 6 would end up in Ward 5. 2 blocks between Anderson and Lynn and from Washington to Fairlawn that are currently in Ward 4 would end up in Ward 6. And 3 blocks from California to Washington and from Race to Cedar that are currently in Ward 5 would end up in Ward 4. And I guess, I never dreamed that asking for this accommodation would cause so much rancor, but I take great exception to it being described as a gerrymander. The term gerrymander comes from the Massachusetts governor of Massachusetts, Edmund Gerry, who, for political purposes, drew a map that had fingers reaching all over the state of Massachusetts to try and put all the members of the opposite party into one district. And to some people, the shape of that district looked like a salamander, and so it became known as a gerrymander. For members of this council to sit here and look at Ward 6 and the way that it's drawn and say, I'm voting for this map because I oppose a gerrymander, and to vote no on a resolution that would clarify the lines, it would accommodate me. It's not a gerrymander to try to draw the lines so that particular council members are not districted in with each other. But it's absolutely, precisely a gerrymander to draw the lines in an effort to put all the members of one party in one ward. So, it's not a term that I've introduced into the debate, but if the members of this council intend to be honest about what's going on, a gerrymander is precisely what they are voting for if they vote for this map. And my amendment would take at least one step towards correcting that.
Is there further discussion? Got Chief Munn bringing in the large copy. He didn't realize that was not attached to the tripod there. If Chief, if you bring that up, maybe Mr. Otto, you can go up on the map and just visually show us the areas. Just right up there by Mr. Holtz would be fine, I think. Can everybody see it from over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, up a little closer this way, Chief, if you're good. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Mr. Otto, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So basically, what my amendment is proposing is the area north of Washington here, that's currently in Ward 6, will be moved into Ward 5, which is adjacent. Most of the rest of the eastern part of this city that is north of Washington is part of Ward 5. I would also move these 3 blocks right here from California to Washington and from Grace over to Cedar to Ward 4. And there are 2 blocks which are right here. So you have from Fairlawn to Washington and from Anderson to Lynn will be moved into Ward 6 as well, which is adjacent. The net effect of this would be to make the map much more compact and contiguous. It would also accommodate me and avoid having me district in with Ms. Booth. And although Ward 6 would still have some jutting fingers, at least one of the areas of the map would be blocked up. So I respectfully ask for your support for the amendment.
Is there any further discussion about this? Mr. Hayes?
You know, in a way, it's beyond my comprehension to understand why agreements could not have been made before it hit the council floor. Looks like everybody had a chance to air their dirty laundry, if that's what you want to call it, and now we got a mess. And so what Milton is proposing would be a situation where all encumbrance could still run again without bumping heads with each other. But if that's what has to be, then that's what has to be. I'm finished.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Hayes, if you take the chair.
Your Honor.
Again, I think Mr. Otto's proposed amendment makes a lot of, or his amendment makes a lot of sense. For one, in drawing the boundary between 6 and 5 to be basically Washington, it makes very common sense boundary. It makes Ward 6 much more compact and visually understandable, and it, as Mr. Otto said, a lot of, or virtually all of Ward 5 is currently north of Washington, and this just squares both Ward 6 and Ward 5 off in a way that makes a lot of common sense. It further helps by putting a couple of active subdivisions in Ward 5 and taking them out of Ward 6, so that it partially addresses the concern of all the active subdivisions being located in one ward, that being Ward 6. Behringer Commons, which has had a lot of activity in the last several years, would be included in Ward 5 rather than Ward 6 under Mr. Otto's proposal, and the Sunny Estates, which is on just north of Washington, in the Scottswood area, near the Scottswood area, would also be in Ward 5. So it makes a lot of sense that way. And council members have made the argument that this is a privilege for one person to make this kind of an amendment or this kind of a boundary change, and I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, we try to accommodate as many incumbent sitting council members as possible, and this is a very minor change in the ward maps. I don't know exactly what the population of each of those is, but what did you say, about 150 in each one of those, Mr. Otto?
All of those tracks range from 130 to 150.
Right, so it's an even swap, so that there's virtually no change in the overall population. I checked, those 3 blocks that Mr. Otto is suggesting be moved from Ward 5 into Ward 4, and there were 25 people in those 3 blocks that voted in the last municipal election. And that ward, let's see, there were over 750 ballots cast in that ward, and so the 25 that came from that area would represent 3% of about 3% of the total vote out of Ward 5. So this is a virtually insignificant change when you talk about the numbers. I think it makes a lot of sense. People have said this is a privilege for one person. I simply don't buy that argument. When we've seen that, council members are willing to create and support a map that concentrates the members of one party into Ward 6, and they call that good government. I mean, that is just shocking to me that they could call that good government when they call this, to use their own words, gerrymandering. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I think this is a very good proposal, and I would hope that council members would support it. Tooth?
I cannot support this amendment. For those who have followed my service on the council over the last 7 years, I hope would understand that for me, the people who live in Ward 5 are more than just plus voters. I have done a great deal of work in my ward, regardless of people's political affiliation, whether they have a D or an R by their name or nothing at all, whether they're registered to vote or not. And to suggest that, there's only 25 or so Democratic votes coming from the area that Mr. Otto, excuse me, I have the floor, that Mr. Otto is suggesting be shaved off of my ward and thrown into Ward 4 to accommodate him, just is painful. Across the street from me are 3 blocks in which 150 of my neighbors reside. These are people I see every single day, in the morning when I leave for work, on the weekends when I'm out gardening, and on the way home from work each day. And these are people I represent without consideration to their party affiliation. They are my neighbors, and to slice them off to accommodate Mr. Otto is wrong. It's unethical. And despite that this area might not look like a salamander, it is for political purposes. It's for Mr. Otto's purposes, and it is gerrymandering, and I cannot support it.
Further discussion, Mr. Whalen.
Just aside, it's interesting that Ms. Huth might mention that her neighbors, she sees them every day. Well, the point I tried to make earlier was that the people that are in my ward I will not see every day, possibly maybe once a month, if at all. So, What are we playing here? What game are we playing? This is not well done. This is not done with any concept of fair representation. And I think that Mr. Otto's motion here is quite appropriate, and I plan to support it.
Further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor?
Roll call, please.
Oh, yes. Mr. Williams is asking for a roll call.
Could I clarify, it's the roll call on the motion to amend Mr.
Right.
Otto's
This
proposal?
is the motion to amend. People need the motion restated, or has everyone got a good idea what the motion is? Clerk?
Ms. Chenoweth?
No.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
No.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
No.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
No.
Motion fails. We're back to the main motion, which is the one we find in our packet. Further discussion? There's no further discussion? Yes, Mr. Otto.
Yeah. I would just encourage members to vote no. This map has serious deficiencies. There are deficiencies that can be addressed if we sit down and try to work together and arrive at a consensus map. And we don't have to go down this road, and I hope that we don't.
Further discussion? Ms. Wyman.
I'd like to point out and remind council members, or remind some council members, that this is a map that that I saw more than 6 months ago, that Mr. Otto saw more than 6 months ago, that others of us also saw more than 6 months ago. And if Mr. Otto had such grave concerns about the proposal that's in front of us today, which is virtually identical to the proposal he saw more than 6 months ago, I wish he would have brought it up then. I think the fact that he didn't, and that's why we have this map in front of us today, speaks to the real reason he's opposing it, and that is because it does not redraw his proposed house that he has under contract into a new ward where he would not face an incumbent. That's what I see as the real reason for his stated opposition to this map, rather than the idea that this is in some other way inappropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Whalen?
You know, considering what Ms. Huth said about seeing her neighbors every day, it brings to mind my motion earlier. And I wonder if you folks, I know you're sympathetic to Ms. Huth's thought about that, if you wouldn't give my proposal the same consideration. And so consequently, I would make that motion again to change those two areas, one going into the 7th and the other going into the 6th. And again, Behringer comments, pardon me?
I'm not sure you can make that motion a second time after it's been defeated. Somebody
Well, okay. I would like to include in that a further addition. That would modify it.
Let's hear what...
It's an elephant with a different
Okay.
head. An elephant, appropriately so. And I would also suggest that we move Behringer Commons into the 5th Ward, which I didn't propose earlier, but for obvious reasons. But I think that would be my motion.
Well, your motion is to move the area from that you addressed in your previous motion from 7 into 6 and 6 into 7. The area that's currently in 6 from McHenry to Windsor and Anderson to Philo, and the area that's currently in 7 from Florida to the railroad tracks and line described that we discussed earlier. around Colorado, and then Philo Road, and move that from 7 into 6. So, and in addition to that, you're suggesting that Behringer Commons be moved from 5, or from 6 to 5, is that right? We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? There's no discussion, all in favor of the
May
motion?
I ask for a roll call on that, please?
Ms. Chenoweth?
No.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Huth?
No.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
No.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
No.
That motion fails. We're back to the main motion. Any other discussion on the main motion? I know a lot of talk has been made of Mr. Otto's purchase of the home, and how he should have gone, and as he's going out looking for houses with the woman that he's engaged to. They're buying their first home together, probably on a weekend, taking a leisurely day of it, going around driving through neighborhoods that they like, and they finally find one. They go in and they fall in love with the house, and by golly, you know what? Mr. Otto forgot to have his ward map in his pocket. And my gosh, is it understandable that he would not have the ward map in his pocket? Golly gee, honey, I know you like the house, but let me check my ward map here. Oh my God, that house is across the street. And and then, not to buy the house because you want to get your relationship off with the person you're engaged to and off to a good start, and a house is a very important part of that relationship. And then the only thing that you would need is a little 3-block amendment to a proposed ward map. You're one of 6 Democrats, and to think that you can't get 4 Democrats to support your request seems bewildering to me. And when we mentioned I know we're talking about the numbers and that these are people's neighbors and so forth, and you have contacts, but that's the nature of ward maps, is we change boundaries. We change boundaries in these ward maps. And so for Ms. Huth to talk about losing 3 blocks, well, there are other wards, just because of the shift in population, where huge areas compared to that are being shifted. And so people need to learn to work with change and have change be an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And so I find it bewildering that the council will not support some of the proposals being made tonight, both the common sense ones that make visual boundaries more easy to understand and make wards more compact, and the proposal by Mr. Otto to include him in a ward that would not currently have an incumbent. So, I find these things bewildering, and I made no secret of it at the last meeting, but this is a map that I plan to veto, and would hope that we can, if the veto is sustained, that we can have a meeting of the minds and make some accommodations, because I don't think we're that far off. And I would hope that we could come together as a council and work for the good of the people of Urbana and come up with a map that could be a consensus.
There is a resolution to this, and I proposed this to Mr. Otto, and that is to do what I would have done if I had purchased if I had gone shopping for a house without my ward map in my pocket, which I didn't on many, many occasions. I had to be very careful, which is to sell his house. The market is extremely hot right now. You could sell it in a day. It wouldn't be a problem at all. You would have a buyer and no problem. In fact, you might even be able to raise the price and sell it for an increased price, and to buy a house in the ward of your choice, whatever that may be. So the solution is simple. Every single council member who sits on council if they're purchasing a house, must purchase a house in the ward in which they serve, or if they want to serve in a different ward, they have to work at that. One thing that I've noticed is that it was Ms. Pat who did an enormous amount of work to put together this ward map for months on end without a peep from Mr. Otto. I don't understand why this is considered to be such a crazy compromise. Any other council member on this floor would have bought a different house immediately to move into the appropriate ward. And in this case, there was an expectation that was not negotiated in any way, and now we're being asked I'm being asked to go 6 months. I made decisions, and I worked over the course of 6 decisions, and I worked through the process, and I worked with Ms. Pat on the map, and it sounds like Mr. Otto did not do so. And so, you reap what you sow, and that's the situation that we're in currently. There is a way out of this situation, and that is to purchase an appropriate home. There are a number of lovely homes in Ward 4, and I'm sure that Mr. Otto and his soon-to-be bride could find one of those homes and move into there if he would like to run in the next election. I know for a fact that if I had moved out of the ward, that many of the people who have spoken here tonight would have done everything in their power to make sure that that was used against me, and would have made no accommodation to me, and would have kicked my butt off of council as quickly as possible. So I don't see why these statements are being made that this is somehow that it's obvious that we should be going along with this particular ninth hour noodling around with the ward.
Yeah. Well, there's a great difference between your situation, Ms. Chenoweth, and Mr. Otto's current situation. In your situation, you were elected from a ward and wanted to move during the term to a house, obviously within the ward. And so you would have to buy one within the ward. There would be no possible accommodation that the council could make for you other than doing a complete redistricting to do that, which would be inappropriate. This comes at a time when the council is entertaining a new ward map. We were not doing that at the time that you were purchasing your home. So we did not have the option of drawing boundaries at that time. And it's not that those sitting here would have liked you to pay the price if you bought a home outside of the ward. The law is that if you do willingly buy a house and you move your residence outside of the ward which you represent, you lose your seat. That's the law. It's not what people decide. It's an existing law. So there are great differences between your situation of a couple of years ago and the situation that Mr. Otto finds himself in now.
Just one final issue, or a couple final points. I know Mr. Otto knows what the map looks like and knew what it looked like. I remember when you were thinking of running for city council, I bought you lunch, we sat down, we looked at the map, we looked at where you needed to live, where you needed to stay, and you found an apartment in the ward without a problem. And so the idea that one doesn't know to go house shopping or apartment shopping without a map, just it doesn't carry water with me. This proposed map draws Ms. Chenoweth and me into the same ward. Now, I rent my housing, as does Mr. Otto, and so when we talked about this, and when we talked about taking care or dealing with the issues of contiguous contiguous boundaries, with trying to decrease split precincts, with keeping together communities of interest, and trying to keep equal populations, I realized that at the next election, there will be a couple different choices. I can either choose to run against Ms. Chenoweth if this map passes, or I can choose to move to another ward, whether that would be Ward 4, as I thought would be a ward without any incumbent, and so I could choose to rent an apartment or buy a house if I have the money, or to any other ward, or maybe Ward 7, where right now, where there, I guess, would not be an incumbent either. But it's something, I mean, I think that we need to look at all of these different issues, and people are making sacrifices to try and keep up with the requirements of the decrease or the reduction in the number of split precincts, the keeping together communities of interest, keeping together equal populations or balancing populations, and keeping the wards contiguous and as compact as possible. Now, you can't do all of that in the most perfect form because people don't live that way, but I think this does address that issue. I regret that Mr. Otto never came to me and never mentioned to me until the night we voted 2 weeks ago, when on the council floor he announced that he was asking for this change and to put his proposed house into the new or the proposed Ward 4, and hadn't talked to me or asked me what I thought about that or if I had any proposals of how else to address this issue. I think this map works within the requirements, and I think it addresses the needs that need to be met for the requirements as well.
Any further discussion? Mr. Otto?
Yeah. Ms. Wyman, we dealt with this at the last meeting, and you were here when Ms. Chenoweth admitted that when you all agreed on this map, you knew that you weren't going to be running against Ms. Chenoweth, and so there wasn't this sacrifice of being districted in with a ward map, but I'm going along with it because of, the greater good of redistricting. What's happening now is lines are being drawn. They're being drawn in a particular way to suit the interests of particular people. And 4 people on this council have decided that my interests are not sufficient to be taken into account in this map. The lines that Esther Pat circulated 6 months ago were not sacrosanct. She didn't intend for them to be sacrosanct, nor were Todd Satterthwaite's lines. Both came back after presenting their maps to council and made revisions in those maps to accommodate the various comments and interests and requests that council members made. So that's as it should be. It's a public process. And so to somehow pretend that, well, a map was circulated 6 months ago, and what you should have done was just, if you didn't buy a house that accommodated that map, which was later changed, as everybody knew these maps were subject to change and likely to be changed, somehow you've disqualified yourself or done something unethical, I think is just, it's wrong. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I would encourage members to vote against it. If they don't, I would encourage the mayor to veto it. If his veto is upheld, I hope that we can reach a compromise.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, can you clarify whether or not on the floor we have the main motion, which is commonly referred to as Ms. Pat's map, or if there is an amendment to that?
Oh, there's no amendment right
Okay,
now.
it's just getting late, and I don't know where I'm at, so.
Right. No, we've got the one that's in the packet,
Okay,
unscathed.
got it.
That's the main motion. Any more discussion? More discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Huth?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes, or no.
Ms. Pat? Yes.
Yeah, it is getting late.
Mr. Whalen?
No. No.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 4 ayes. And that's the end of our meeting tonight. We stand adjourned, and we'll be meeting as the Committee of the Whole next Monday.